I hope you're ready for a long one. Grab your beverage of choice, grab yourself your seat, buckle in, and let's get the crazy train started. This is my update to Panning Punk. Before I start, you know I'm going to ask you to do all of the things, as I always do. You know what they are. All right, so let's talk about this project, okay? This project was created by Allie, who is Wonder in Alleyland. She's going to be linked down below with her channel. And it is in collab with the Fantastic Ladies group on Facebook, so you know you can find them down below also. This started January 1st, is going to run through December 31st of this year. It has monthly updates. We're doing 4 to 6 prompts of the 20 that she had on her list, and we're doing it rolling style. But one of the things she has allowed us to do is to bring in some music of our own choice as well. And I have taken full advantage. So I greatly appreciate Allie's indulgence by letting me do this. What I generally do is I go through and tell you what I've got going on, and then I have a topic that I talk about and then tell you what I'm bringing in. So the hashtag for this one is Panning Punk. Now let's start with what I already have in the project, and that is, the first one for me is Nirvana, and I picked the song Breed instead of the song that Allie had on her list. So I changed it a little bit there. And with that, it's something I really don't care about. For that, I picked my Benefit Gimme Brow. This poor thing is just beleaguered at this point. All of the labeling has completely worn off. I am in shade 2. I had used this 40 times as of the last update. I've used it an additional 21 times. This thing is about on its last legs. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here. It's got more product on the end than it actually does in the wand. So it's just goopy, and I kind of finagle it to make it work. But as long as I'm still getting product, I'm going to go ahead and leave it for now. It may or may not make it to the next update. I'll let you guys know where we end up with that. But for now, we're going to call that as a staying in thing, because I just wanted to see how much I could use it. And I've used it a bajillion times. I had used it before I even got into this project. Okay, so then the next thing I had was Blink 182, What's My Age Again, an older product in your collection. This was also from Allie's list. For this, I had picked the OGX Coconut Milk. I think you can kind of see what that says. And I had been marking it with my black marks on the side. I started at 94.3 grams. The last update we were at 69.3, so I've been plugging away. But I hate this product. Hate it for my hair. Misty, you know I'm the president of her fan club, watched my last video and commented and said, well, what about using it for your body? I thought, well, that's brilliant, because I do like to use an oil under my lotions. I kind of use it as a carrier, or a carrier, basically, just to help the absorption for my dry skin. So that's what I started doing, and it worked like a charm. I actually like this better as a body oil than I ever did as a hair oil, but it's not something I'm going to run out and replace. I don't love it that much. So I did finally manage to finish it off. This is going to be going in the empties, which you will be seeing very shortly from me. So I actually used a total of 61.7 grams on that. Then I had done an entire CBGB's video, and I brought in the band Television with the song Blank Generation. Once again, a product you could take or leave. So not my favorite thing. For this, I brought in the Heritage Stone Rose Petals Rose Water Spray, and I had marked it, and I had gotten so far on the first update, so I started using it on my face. I don't mind it. I just don't really know anything about the brand, so I wasn't like super jazzed, but it worked out just fine. Problem is, I had just the littlest dribble left in it, and the sprayer isn't working. So, bear with me. I'll explain what I did here. Anyway, I'm going to call that an empty. I am going to roll that out because it went with my next prompt, which was also from that video, Patti Smith's song Kimberly, and that I put in as a drugstore item. So I had grabbed my e.l.f. Makeup Mist and Set. Now, we're plugging away here, and I'm down here. This is getting really low, so I took the rest of this and dumped it into this bottle. I don't think it's going to hurt anything. They both work fine, and actually I've used one right after the other on my face anyway, so it should be just fine. This is now down to 36.6 grams before adding the dribbles of that, and we started at 134. So I've used almost 100 grams of this product. This is going to be a roll-up for next month. For now, it is staying in. Okay, then I had The Donnas, and this was off of Allie's list, and the song Who Invited You is the one she picked, and it is a product everyone trashes but you love. Well, I actually picked a brand I trash. But of course, there's one product that I happen to like, and it is the Charlotte Tilbury Film Star Bronze and Glow. I like the bronzer. The glow is eh. I put this in for 10 uses. And I did get my 10 uses. I used this a couple times, but I got 10 uses on the bronzer. And I'm actually, I don't think you can really tell, but I've got a dip in the center of this. I'm fairly impressed. You've seen this before. It's a bronzer. I'm not going to swatch it for you, but this is a rollout. Going back in the bronzer drawer. Okay, so then the next one is Paramore Misery Business. Also Allie's list. A product from a brand known for only one thing. Kind of. I went with my Little Baby Becca Champagne Pop Highlighter. I thought this was an eyeshadow. I didn't even realize it was Champagne Pop. And I put this in for 10 uses because I hadn't used it because I didn't know what it was. I'm brilliant that way. So I like this a lot. I'm impressed. Of course I am now that Becca's gone. I mean, I could get it through Smashbox, but whatever. So I got my 10 uses. It's a champagne highlighter. It is gorgeous. It is going to roll back into my highlighter drawer, but it's got some good shine. I really, really did enjoy it, and I'm glad that I have it. Eventually, I'm going to get that into a project to finish, but not right now. So, got to get the wipe because I'm going to be making a mess of this video. I'm trying to get smarter with this stuff, so you guys just kind of have to work with me. You know how it is. All right, so that is also a rollout. Then, I brought in, from the video that I did about female-led punk bands and female punk bands, I brought in the band The Pandoras. And I brought in the song You Don't Satisfy just because I like the song. But what I decided to do was bring in my Sydney Grace Pandora eyeshadow. I love this. Now, I put this in for 5 uses. Pretty, pretty, pretty. And I did get my 5 uses. Isn't that gorgeous? And so that's going to go back into my palette. One more rollout. And then, in that same video, I also brought in Bikini Kill and brought in the song Rebel Girl. So something that's fit for a queen. I have another Sydney Grace on that one, but this time I went with Tiara. And this is kind of a unique color, but it is stunning. So it's more of a, I mean, you can see like Champagne Pop, and that's got more of a metallic tone to it, I guess you would say. And that, I hit my 5 use goal, and that is also rolling out. We're going to have almost a whole refresh here, you guys. All right. So that is everything that we had active. All right. Let's talk a little bit about my topic for this month. And I am taking you way back this time. I am actually going pre-punk. And I am talking about the MC5 and Wayne Kramer, kind of a little bit more specifically, though I did watch a lot of information on a bunch of the other guys. I've watched video interviews, I've got the CDs, I've actually got the book, which is the reason that more of the information comes from Wayne Kramer. It's because it's his book. So, all right. This is a band that primarily was around from 64 to 72. So it predates punk. They were from a suburb of the Detroit area. A couple of the guys were, well, at least 2 of the guys were in school together, but they were all around the same age, with one small exception, if I have my information correct. So we have Wayne Kramer on guitar. We have Fred Sonic Smith on guitar, and Sonic came from his guitar. Actually, that's how he adopted that nickname. We have Michael Davis on bass, but he actually joined in 65. And then we have Dennis Machine Gun Thompson on drums, and the man who was known most famously as Robin Tyner. That was not his birth name, but it was a name he adopted, and specifically after John Coltrane's pianist. And he is the lead vocalist from the MC5. Now, Rob is, I believe, a few years older than Fred and Wayne. And I think he had a younger brother that Wayne knew, and that's kind of how they met. Originally, they had talked about bringing him in as the bassist, and that didn't quite work out. So then he wasn't going to be in the band, but then they went back because they needed a vocalist, so they asked him to do that, and he actually took that on. And kind of an interesting choice, but excellent job. I think that it worked out really well having Rob Tyner as their vocalist. So these guys had been around. They were known for being a live band. Kind of how a lot of bands start. Their original sound had a little bit of the garage band sound, and the first thing that they released was, I believe, I think it was 67. And it was a cover of the Them song, I Can Only Give You Everything. Yes, okay, just want to make sure I had that right. The B-side on that is One of the Guys. Now, I Can Only Give You Everything, like I said, is a Them song off of the album Them Again, which I believe was their second album in 66. That's the Van Morrison band. And the MC5, which stands for Motor City 5, being out of Detroit, that's where the automotive industry was, in case there was confusion. They wanted to do Gloria as the B-side. Well, Shadows of the Night did it and had a hit with it, which is actually my favorite version. I like the Them version, but I think the Shadows of the Night version was the first I'd ever heard. So that's actually my favorite. I love the song. But because they had done it and had a hit with it, the guys decided that they were going to put something else on the B-side. And so that song, One of the Guys, is actually their first original song that was released. Now, these guys are playing around. They played the 66 Michigan State Fair. And that's important because that's where John Sinclair found them the first time. They were playing every venue that they could get into. In 1967, they became the house band for the Grandy Ballroom. This venue was actually originally a ballroom and had the stage and the whole thing, and then just became more of a live band, dance hall type, or dance club. I don't know what you would have called it back in that era. So the band, as the core group with the main guys, like I said, we're talking about 64 to 72. And there's going to be all kinds of things that we're going to discuss here. So this is another one of those things that I'm doing. That this isn't necessarily a trigger warning, but this is we're going to talk about some things that may not be pleasant to all viewers. Definitely not appropriate for children. Okay? There's going to be anti-government rhetoric. There's going to be anti-establishment philosophy. There's going to be strong language. There is going to be addiction issues. There will be incarceration. Now you know what the stage is set for, so let's talk about what's going on here. All right. The guys, when they started this, were very young. When Wayne Kramer talks about, like, kind of starting this, he was in school, he got the guitar, he learned how to play, he was really into Chuck Berry, wanted to form a band, really wanted to be a musician. That's what he wanted to do with his life. So they start getting this band together, and, like, he's performing, and he's talking about being 17 and being on stage and performing live at that age. And so they're young. They have the attitude of youth. All right. Let's just clarify a little bit of what's going on so that this makes a little bit of sense. There are a lot of things in the world going on that, as a young person, young people, they were seeing and didn't necessarily agree with, and they wanted to be an instrument, to an extent, of change. They wanted to see society progress. So they were considered very political, and they were considered radical. Now, their first album is Kick Out the Jams. In the introduction to this, well, all right, at this point, too, I think John Sinclair is their manager. But anyway, the intro, as Robin announces it for this song, is he yells out, I think it's time to kick out the jams, mother effer. Now, when this became the title of their first album, when this album was recorded, it was recorded October 30th and 31st of 1968 at the Grandy Ballroom. It was a live thing. Nobody had done that before. This was the first band that their first release was a live album. That didn't become popular until the 70s to be doing a lot of live album releases. So it was very unusual. They actually brought equipment down to the Grandy. They recorded these guys 2 nights in a row. They were supposed to have a say and be able to redo things if they didn't like it. And they were supposed to have approval on the artwork and all kinds of other stuff that was supposed to be going on. Now, at this point, they are on Elektra Records. And so, of course, they're all hyped up to do this. And the first night, according to Wayne's biography, goes badly, really badly. But they did the second night, and they weren't happy with the sound. They weren't happy with some of the things. They were supposed to have creative control. It didn't happen. The record company released it. None of them were happy. So I'm trying not to make this too long, and there's no way to really avoid it. There was a single released for Kick Out the Jams, which was supposed to be the first thing that was going to go to radio stations at this point, and that's how they would have gotten known, because there wasn't the internet. Okay, so there was no other way to get music out other than to have the people in front of you or to get it on a radio station and hope that it got picked up in different areas. And they had recorded a clean version that was Kick Out the Jams brothers and sisters. 2 of the 5 guys, they did this as a democracy, 2 of the 5 guys wanted to use the clean version. The other 3 were like, no, we really want to stay true to who we are, and this is kind of who we are. We're in your face. We're, this is before punk. So they were definitely different. And from their first release, that single, to this album, their sound is changing too. They're trying to progress. They're trying to come up with a new sound and advance musically. So none of them were happy with this album. They weren't happy with the photography for the cover art. They weren't happy with any of it. But the record company released it anyway. So it gets out. It's in the big department store, which was Hudson's in Detroit at the time. And we didn't have the PMRC and Tipper Gore and all that stuff. This is before all of that even happened. So there weren't parental warnings on albums. And it was found out that the F word was used in this. So it kind of got one of those things where the store pulled it. And the band, being young and stupid, reacted badly, took out a full-page newspaper ad basically saying, well, screw Hudson's, go buy your album from someone else, which in turn then made the department store pull everything from Elektra off their shelves. Subsequently, Elektra dropped the band. Now, John Sinclair is managing these guys, and John Sinclair, if you look him up, is a very incredibly radical, political, outspoken person. And he was writing for the Fifth Estate, which was like a local newspaper type of thing, kind of a communal living, was a pot smoker. Actually got busted giving 2 joints to an undercover female narcotics officer and got a 10-year sentence. So he had seen these guys at the 66 Michigan State Fair, really liked them. Some of the guys knew who he was before this, but he didn't necessarily know them. So he starts following them and seeing them there at the Grandy. So he's going to see them. They get to know each other. And he says, hey, you guys kind of need someone to help you out, make sure that your gigs are scheduled and you're getting there on time and you have strings for your guitars and your equipment showing up and you got your amps and all that stuff, that you have things. So he took over their management. Well, when he gets arrested, that ends and things go back to being chaotic. Now, chaos is inherent in punk, and these guys kind of set the stage. There's a lot of chaos going on. They were your basic late 60s kind of hippies. I mean, nothing super crazy. They were affiliated with the White Panther Party. This is something that's frequently talked about, so it's important to kind of know. The Black Panther Party was militant to the point where they did actually become violent. The White Panthers were an allied group that was an offshoot for people that weren't of color, because the Black Panther Party was for people that identified as black at that time. So these guys weren't violent. They were radical and political and were looking for change, but it wasn't a militant activist group like the Black Panther Party became known as being. So they're embraced by a lot of the culture, and this album comes out and they're touring, and it's just like, okay, yeah, these guys are like in your face and their sound is discordant and they're loud, and the whole thing is that they are a live band, and that's the vibe you're getting. And Kick Out the Jams comes from them heckling Janis Joplin's guitarist. Joplin was rehearsing for her set, her guitarist kept stumbling over a certain part. She would be yelling at him. The guys were sitting there and they were drinking and smoking and whatnot and yelling at the guitarist, kick out the jams or get off the stage. So it was kind of a heckle, but it kind of became their thing, and it ended up being a song that Warren and Rob wrote, became an anthem for them, essentially. It was a rallying cry. It's what they're known for. It's been covered by a bunch of bands. It's probably something that you've actually heard of. Now, there's a couple parts to this. The rallying cry was basically we're standing for certain things that we want to see change in the political climate, in the social climate. They wanted more advancement in minority rights. They wanted more advancement in women's rights, which is actually really cool. They really, really were advocates of the drug and sexual revolution that was going on at the time. But the biggest cause was Vietnam. Knowing the time frame this is happening, the draft existed. So when you turned 18, you got a draft notice. You had to go down to the draft board. You registered. And it a lot of times was after you graduated from high school or when you turned 18, whichever happened, I think, later. I'm not 100% certain on. This doesn't exist anymore. So this was not you're going to a recruiter, you're signing up. This was, hey, you're male and you're of age, you're going. Unless there's a reason for you not to go, if the military will not accept you. These guys had reasons. They ended up not going, but they did have to go before the draft board. I mean, it wasn't like they were exempt because they were a band. They were still brought before it, and just for various reasons were not accepted. Because when you did that and you went and registered and did all that stuff, a lot of times you got put on a bus immediately and shipped off for training and then sent over. So this was a big thing. And this was the first war that there was a big backlash in from the people of that age that were the ones that were going to war. The ones that were on college campuses were really protesting. This was a big thing, and it was not a popular thing. So that's the climate that this is all happening during. Now, the first record, Kick Out the Jams, was recorded those 2 nights at the Grandie. It was recorded in 68, released in 69. So we're kind of talking the heyday of all these things. But these guys got slammed by reviewers and by critics because of the sound. Because it's what happens when you have live music. Everything that will go wrong in a live show got recorded and released. Not because they wanted it to, but because the record label did it. So their second album, they decide, okay, we're going to go in, we're going to be technically proficient. At this point now, they're working with Atlantic, is the label that they're working under. They were with Electro, started recording, got dropped. Atlantic picked them up. They finished the recording. So this one is cleaner. It is still discordant. It is still very short songs, very fast paced, very in your face, very much, getting whatever message or whatever it is that they were saying across. But once again, there's a backlash. This time, they're being labeled as sellouts because this one is more polished. They're not radical enough. Go figure, right? This album is actually the reason that they are pre-punk. What happened with Elektra is they didn't have a lot of support. They went on tour for the first album. They did fine. It was okay. And they had a following, so it wasn't that bad. But they didn't have a lot of label backing. And now when they got to Atlantic had a really strong presence in the UK. So they really did a lot of promotion for this album. So it got out there. And because it was a few years before punk, it set the stage for a lot of what happened in the punk movement. And now this is in 71 that this is released. So you're really looking at right as punk is going to be starting. These guys kind of gave them the blueprint. And this is something that was unbeknownst to the band at the time. They didn't realize this was how this was happening. They were touring all over the world with these things, but really didn't understand how the labels worked and what promotion was. Record companies back in the day could make or break you. Now it's completely different. If you had good promotion and you had good backing and the label liked you, they could push somebody who was mediocre into the charts. If they didn't like you or you didn't have a good rep or whatever, you floundered. And that's why there's a lot of bands that did an album or did an album that did okay and then their next two did nothing and got buried. and it had to do with how labels were run. Okay, so loved by the fans, especially in the UK, criticized in the US by the fans, but appreciated more by the critics. These guys can't win. By the time we get to the third album, this is 1972's High Times. They were personally becoming such a mess. Half of this album is written by Fred Sonic Smith. And it's not to say that he wasn't doing some of these drugs too, but at this point we've gone from pot smoking to harder drugs, cocaine, heroin, these kinds of things. The alcoholism, all of this is becoming an issue. It is kind of falling apart. By the end of 72, in Europe, Kramer and Smith fulfilled their contractual obligations and did tour. I've seen some concert footage, and it is visible, the difference in them personally. And it is, it's 2 of the 5 guys from the band. They don't look good. Can they play? Absolutely. I mean, they're still brilliant players, but they're a mess. It's sad to see. So basically, they finish up, and at that point, everything's just done. Fred Sonic Smith is, I think, on the 100 best guitarists list. He eventually married Patti Smith. Part of the lyrics to her most favorite song, Because the Night, that she did with Bruce Springsteen, she wrote the verses. Those were actually written about him. They do end up getting married. They have a couple of children. They stay married until he has a heart attack, I think, until he passes away. So they were together for quite some time. I think they were married over a decade before that happened. I think they were married like 11 years before that happened. And Rob Tyner, now not being with the band, is still doing music also. Until his death, he had a heart attack at the age of 46. He was still putting stuff out there, and he was still really popular locally in Detroit. And he's a lot of the sound. He's the voice of the band. So if you catch some of his stuff later on, you're getting that vocal, and he had that until the very end. And with Fred Smith, after everything was done with MC5, he went on and had a band called Ascension, and then Sonic Rendezvous. I never get this right. If I can remember, I'll put it on the screen because I screw it up all the time. But his second band after was excellent. I mean, he was just a phenomenal guitar player, and he was actually a really good singer too. He didn't do a lot of vocals. Now, Wayne Kramer only wanted to be a musician. That was his thing. And so he's trying to get some stuff together, and he figures, all right, if we can get the money to get the equipment and go on tour and do all these things, I can still make it as a career musician. I can still have a band. So he decides that the way that he's going to do this is by selling a lot of drugs. And that's how he's going to fund the new band. Not the brightest move. He had a bit of a history as a petty criminal, whatever. It got worse and worse. With the addictions, it also became worse. These things do go that way. I am not in any way belittling or downplaying how serious addiction is. Unfortunately, we've discussed this before with other musicians, and it will come up again. This is something that does happen in the music industry quite a bit, where you have alcoholism, you have drug addictions, you have whatever else going on. It's very, very sad, but unfortunately, it is not uncommon. So anyway, Wayne is doing all of these really dumb, really bad things. Like, we're talking robbing houses, setting up like trafficking amounts of drugs to try and get the money together to do all this stuff, and gets arrested. Even he says he deserved it. I mean, this isn't like, it is not the same as the John Sinclair thing, where it was 2 joints, which now with legalization of marijuana, that isn't even, in a lot of states, isn't even an offense. So Wayne gets really lucky and ends up only getting 4 years. And he's before the judge. There was some kind of a thing where someone said, well, oh, it was supposed to be 5 years. Oh, no, wait, I was wrong. It was supposed to be 3 years. And the judge says, well, I'll split the difference. I'll give you 4. So he goes to jail right from court, and then ends up in the Lexington facility, which is a federal prison. But it was originally started as more of a drug help facility. Laws are written weirdly and strange things happen, and it depends on government policy a lot of times. So originally this building was set up to help people with addiction issues. And then as the laws were changed, they criminalized a lot of what doctors were able to do with prescriptions, saying that addiction at that point is not a medically recognized condition. So therefore, doctors treating it is not something that can happen. This building turns into a federal prison. That's where Wayne goes. He does his time. He meets some interesting people in there. He does some interesting things. He gets to take a look at himself, okay? And he knows that he's got some issues. He knows that it's not just the drugs, that there's underlying things that make him go that way. This becomes an ongoing battle for him for a very long time. He gets out. He does not want to go back. He's, to an extent, scared straight by some of what he's seen and some of the people that he's met. So he stays clean for a while. But unfortunately, he went back to the same environment, and his girlfriend was using, and it didn't take long before he's using again. So he does decide that he is going to move to New York, and he hooks up with Johnny Thunders from the Heartbreakers, who we've discussed before, and we know what kind of a heroin fiasco this turns into. He was part of Gang War, and it was a whole lot of drugs and a whole lot of just irresponsibility and music, yeah, but these guys were a hot mess. All right, so because the MC5 was a live band, a lot of their shows were recorded. Their studio albums are the three that I have mentioned. There are several others, and they come from recordings that were done back in the day, but not necessarily like remastered or released until later. Although there were other songs that maybe weren't necessarily on some of those three albums. Just to kind of clarify all of that. All right. I'm trying to think if there's anything. I'm trying to keep this shorter. I did this once before and it was like an hour, and I don't want to do that to you guys. So I'm trying to think if there's anything. Oh, okay. So there's a couple of small things that I do want to touch on. After a couple of the guys had passed away, these guys, you got to remember, are of a certain age. Time takes its toll on everybody. So it wasn't, some of them, I think Rob Tyner was 46 when he had a heart attack and died. That does happen, and that is young, but it wasn't like he was doing something bad. I think he was in his car by his house. I mean, he was parked, he wasn't driving, and just had a heart attack. And I want to say Fred Smith had a heart attack too. But anyway, so the three remaining members of the band that were still alive toured as DKT. So you've got, I'm going to screw this up. I know I'm going to screw this up. Michael Davis, the bassist. Wayne Kramer, the guitarist. Dennis Machine Gun Thompson, the drummer. Couldn't get that out. So those three, because they were still around, actually got together and toured under DKT MC5 for about 3 years. And they were hugely popular still. I mean, their music had a great impact. It cannot be denied. And the thing is, like I said, these guys weren't even aware of it originally and started to see more of it as these three were touring again, and the reception that they were getting in other places and how popular they were with people that were younger. Now, 50 years after the release of Kick Out the Jams, Wayne Kramer does put together a group of guys from some different bands. We got some people from Fugazi, Faith No More, a few bands, and does an MC50 tour. Throughout the years, he's had his problems, he's had his addictions, he's gotten clean, he's gone to the methadone clinic a couple of times, he's moved to Key West, he's taken up woodworking, he's come back, all of this. But music is really where his heart is. And so he puts this together, and he had at one point helped some of the guys and some of the estates get some royalty money that was due to them. They really were not managed well, you guys. It just was bad. But they do tour. He does do the MC50 tour, and now he's the only one of the original band. And he and Fred Smith founded it, but he's the only one of the original five that was left to do this at that point. I don't think he was the only living one at that point, which he is now. Everybody else has passed away. He is still alive. How this kind of concludes is something that is really cool. So, because they were so popular in the UK and England, the Clash knew who they were and wrote a song called Jail Guitar Doors. The first line of the song, let me not screw this up because this is important. Let me tell you about Wayne and his deals of cocaine. Okay, the next part talks about Pete Green of Fleetwood Mac. And I'll tell you about Pete didn't want no fame. I think his was an LSD thing. I'm not entirely certain on that, but he didn't want the money, didn't want the fame, didn't want any of that, just wanted to be the musician. And then the third person mentioned in this song is, and then there's Keith waiting for trial. I don't think it's a big secret to anybody, Keith Richards' issues, drug problems, and legal problems because of that. So the Clash did this song talking about all of these things in the industry and mentioning these really big musicians. So we're going to get to the Clash in detail later on. They're on my list, trust me. But there is a person in England named Billy Bragg who was greatly inspired by the Clash, and I'm actually going to read this from the book so that I get this correctly, because this will make a lot more sense. So, let me get to it. Quote, Billy explained that he founded Jail Guitar Doors UK to celebrate Joe Strummer's life's work. It was Joe and the Clash who first inspired Billy to pick up the guitar and raise his voice for justice, so he named his initiative after their song. Now, Billy Bragg knows Wayne Kramer. They actually were going to be doing, I think, a jail concert together. And so he says to Wayne, hey, have you heard this Clash song? Wayne looks at him and goes, yeah, it's about me. Billy's like, oh, yeah, okay. So this is on the 5th anniversary of Joe Strummer's death, he had started doing this. And what the program was is that they were bringing music and guitars to prisoners. The purpose was to give them an alternate form of conflict resolution without violence. Music is very successful in expression. So that was the initiative, to give them something to help them focus, to help them learn something different, to give them a way to express themselves in a more healthy manner. So they do this show, and I know we've talked about Rage Against the Machine. Maybe I haven't talked about Rage. Anyway, I know Tom Morello is part of this. I'm a Rage fan too. So he's there with them. All these guys are there, and they do this show, and Rage has kind of picked up the mantle of being the political group that I see MC5 as being from their era. I think they kind of picked up that mantle. But anyway, so these guys all know each other. They're all together. They're doing the concert. Billy and Warren have this conversation, and Billy says, well, here's the deal. I was going to have you do this anyway. So what happened is Wayne Kramer did actually start the U.S. version of Jail Guitar Doors, which is ironic. I mean, it's really full circle here. But he actually started that in 2009. He is still active in it. It is still going on. It is still existing. Even with what happened with the pandemic, they were still able to get music there, even though they couldn't necessarily go in person. They've expanded the initiative to work in lower income areas with the children to try and help them avoid becoming part of the penal system. Punk isn't always anti-establishment, I guess. But I just thought that out of everything bad that does happen or that we do talk about, I really wanted to highlight something that ties it all together and is a good thing and is a forward-moving thing that actually is helping accomplish some of those goals. Wayne Kramer is still a very political animal, okay? Very much so. We'll always be looking for more social advancements, looking for more justice, more equality, reform, better policy, all of that stuff, okay? That's just who he is. Now, he did do a lot in prison with freeform jazz. He has released several albums after all of this stuff with the MC5. I am not a squiggly jazz fan. This is not my area. My understanding is they are very good, not something I can speak to. But he has done several albums, and actually I think he has his own record label too at this point, he and his wife. So let's talk about the songs, okay? When I do these, I always bring in songs with the bands that I'm talking about and put out prompts. If anybody ever wants to do this, have at it, take it. I'm cool with that. So I decided that I was going to do some songs from each of their albums. So with Kick Off the Jams, of course, I had to do the title track. So like I said, this was one of those things that as a musician, Kick Out the Jams meant Get your butt up there, give it everything. Everything you do should be for your audience. It's 125% at all times. Leave it on the stage. So for me, I thought something that gives its all, would be a great prompt. Ramblin Rose is not something I would normally put in here. It is a cover song. But I put it in because it is how they started their sets. It is the first song on Kick Out the Jams. And it's actually sung by Wayne Kramer, which is a little bit unique too. And it's done in a falsetto. If you ever go check it out, check out the older version. I'm going to try and link the 1970 concert from Wayne State. It's got a few of these songs in it. And you'll see what I mean. Now, I'm not going to tell you to go listen to everything they've ever done. Some of it actually makes my migraines kick off a little bit too. It is very, very much. They were doing a lot of the feedback stuff, and at one point, Kramer says in his book, Hendrix was doing it and doing it better, and it was, aggravating him. But they were actually doing it around the same time without knowing each other back then. They did hear and meet Hendrix, obviously, later, and were very impressed with his skills. So some of it's a little bit rough, but overall, I think it's a good album. Second album, back in the USA, I picked the song Tonight. Beautiful song. Definitely something that is worth a listen. For that, I figured it should be an item that gives you a natural night out look. I also picked Looking at You. I'm not going to go into how politically they're twisting it, because that's not what the song was originally about. That's not what the lyrics are about. But the song is a song of admiration. It's a song of appreciating something you find beautiful. And Kramer and Smith's guitars, I appreciate as beautiful. So for this, it is an item you think is beautiful. Now, from High Time, I picked Sister Ann. And the prompt for this is a makeup savior. If you listen to what the lyrics are about, it's about my sister Ann, and she can handle it, she can fix it, she can do it. She's the go-getter. And there's a little bit of a weird thing with the recording, but I've never been able to hear it to figure out how it works. There's a story about it where it was done in too high of a key, so Robin couldn't quite get it, but he muscled through to get the recording done. I've only heard I think live versions of it, so I can't tell if that's how that played out, but I liked the song, so I threw it on there. And then probably one of the most, oddly enough, sensual songs. We're talking along the lines of You Can Leave Your Hat On type of vibe to it. The song is called Miss X. And Rob Tyner does an outstanding vocal on this. There's a keyboard in this that kicks it off that is beautiful. There is a video out there of Wayne Kramer in the studio with Kesha doing the vocals on this, and she just kicks butt on it also. The song is beautiful. I absolutely love it. I had to include it. Now, I have mentioned that It's a Man's World by James Brown is probably the first song that I heard by these guys that I consciously remember. I know I'd heard Kick Out the Jams, but that's my song. I think they do the best version of it. I've mentioned I'm not a big James Brown fan. Not the musical part. It's his voice. There's something about his voice that doesn't quite work for me. Now, I also, before I had a copy of their version, also had the Concrete Blonde version of this song and loved that one too. Now, this song can be found on the Teenage Lust album. It's not included as a prompt, but just for your edification. The Teenage Lust album was released in 1996, but it's from a recording from the Saginaw Civic Center in Michigan in 1970. So that's where you're going to find that. But that was a song that was used on the soundtrack to the movie The Runaways, about the band, The Runaways. Gotta love it. Once again, full circle. So I just thought I would throw that in there for you since we're already going way over on time. All right, what I am bringing in. Not all of it is MC5 stuff. I wanted to hit more of Allie's list. I don't know why I blanked on that. And get more of these songs covered because I want to make sure I get everything in before it ends at the end of the year. So I brought in Fall Out Boy, She's My Winona, a product that has your heart and soul forever. For this, I am bringing in the Mary Kay eyeshadow. This is the size that the current eyeshadows are. but this has been around a long time. This is spun silk. You've seen me use it before. And this is a 3.3 gram pan. And I want to finish this. I know, I'm ambitious. I don't know that you can see this. It basically is like a matte version of this and this combined. So I don't know that that is even showing up anymore. Anyway, that's the first one. I told you this is going to be almost a whole refresh. I'm bringing in Panic at the Disco song, High Hopes, a product for which you have high hopes or hope you can reach your goal. I have an e.l.f. concealer. I know you guys are going to laugh at me about this. So I have this e.l.f. concealer. This is fair, okay? Do you see how brown that is? I can't use this as a concealer, but I've managed to use this as part of my eye priming step, and it has got windowing all over it. So my goal is to finish this off, okay, you guys? I'm not going to pull the stopper. It's just going to be as much as I can get out of it, and I'm hoping that I can get it done. Okay, oh God, I can't see what... But anyway, basically what this will do for me, because it's so dark, is it will cancel out all the veins that you can see in my eyes. I'm very, very translucent. You can see my veins. So it evens it out. It gives me a base, and then I put primer over it, and there's a whole thing that I do. Goal is to finish. We are starting that at 20.2 grams. All right. I am bringing in Good Charlotte's I Don't Want to Be in Love, a product you can use for multiple things or in multiple ways. Here's your old lady tip of the day. I have the Laura Geller Baked Highlighter in French Vanilla, and this thing is well loved. You can actually see the dip in mine, okay? I use it that often, but here's the trick. I don't use it as a normal highlighter. I use it this way. I do that for a couple of reasons, okay? One, I don't use concealer then to clean up. I use this, and what it does is it does highlight, and granted it's puffy there, but it does highlight the outer edges, brings my eye up, and detracts from some of the dark circle that I can't get rid of even with color corrector. And concealer is my nemesis, obviously. So that is one of my tricks to try and combat some of that. My goal on that is 40 uses. I know it's a lot, but I use it with every makeup look. So, all right. Now we're going to get to some of the MC5 songs that I am bringing in for this. My first one is Ramblin Rose. Of course it is. It is a rose in your collection. So I went with Huda Beauty's Rose Quartz. I didn't say Huda Booty. I'm playing Deb and Danny. It's their fault. Anyway, I am going to bring this in. I don't know why when I film my fingers don't work. I'm going to do a No Pan Left Behind. I got my notes on it. I am not doing the slime shade. But you've seen it. It's pretty. We're going to have a lot of pink looks coming up. So that is coming in. And then I am bringing in Miss X. I think I've expressed my admiration for this song quite well. Something sensual. I am bringing in Mac's Under the Covers. Come on. Seem to fit. It's got the pretty packaging. It is my shade of pink. Okay. I'm not left-handed. That's the color on that one. I'm bringing this in for 5 uses, and you know for me, a use is a day, no matter how many reapplications it may be. I think I dug my hand into my eyeshadow. All right, then the last one I am bringing in is Looking at You, something you think is beautiful. We've discussed the song. Some of this you've seen, some of this you haven't. I am bringing in this gorgeous Mermaid Palette, okay? This is from Bitter Lace Beauty. It actually has a mermaid mirror on it, but that will blind you, and I have my card on there. So you've seen some of my highlighters because they've been in projects, and I have 2 different sugar spuns, and they actually look different. But what we're focusing on is the top row, okay? We're going to bring these in for 3 uses each. You're going to get swatches. So the first one is Burnish. That's Burnish. Man, I really should have done this on the other hand. So there's Burnish. And then we have the blue one. Yeah, you're seeing blue. I'm seeing blue. That one. Gosh, these are so pretty. So that's Burnish. And then we have the word that I say that is not frequently used, and now I have found it 3 times in my makeup collection. Arcane. And I don't know what you're seeing, but this is actually like a jewel tone purple. And I think it's coming across a little bit blue, but when you see it next to the blue, you'll be able to tell the difference. So you can see that they are all different. And you can see the flips on them. And then finally, the white one is called Luster. And it has a lot of pink to it. Now, there's a couple reasons that I'm doing this. These are technically highlighters. I think you can see that. But you can also use them as eyeshadows. And that's what I want to do, is I want to try and use them both ways. So I'm bringing them in for 3 uses each. And that is my goal on that one. Makeup everywhere. All right. So I have nothing else for you. I have rambled long enough. Thank you for sticking with me. I do appreciate it. Anything you want to leave in the comments for me is always appreciated. Thank you so much. And until next time, see ya. Bye.